Hello. I have really let the month of March get away from me, and we're already in like the last full week of March, I think. And I haven't even filmed my February wrap up yet, so that's what this is. Sorry it's so late. I don't know where the month has gone, to be honest with you. And I did actually read a ton of books in February, but luckily some of them, in fact quite a few of them, I read for a video that you have already seen, so I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. But for now, let's just quickly wrap up a few statistics. I actually have quite a few books that I read in February that I don't actually own copies of, which isn't great because I'm supposed to be trying to read from my physical TBR, but anyway, so I am going to have to be referring to my reading journal throughout this video because otherwise I will forget something. But let's start off with how many books I actually read in the month of February, which was 18 books. So I read tons in February, which is great. And I think, again, I read quite a lot in February of last year as well, so I don't know what it is about. January and February tend to be pretty good reading months for me, and then March kind of dips a bit, and it has this year too. You'll see that hopefully towards the beginning of April, not the end of April. But anyway, in terms of series, I started 2 series, I continued 1 series, and I finished 2 series. So I'm doing pretty well, and I'll explain that as we kind of go along. So the first book that I read in February, I was about to say March then, February, was The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. My note, my word in my reading journal to describe this was angst. It was very, very angsty. It follows, what's her name? Follows Winnie, who wants to become part of this kind of society of monster hunter type people, and to be able to join that society she has to kind of complete a solo mission and kill some kind of a monster by herself, and her family don't want her to do this because it's dangerous, and she really wants to be a part of this community, so she joins this event to be able to kill a monster by herself and join this group of monster hunters, and it all just kind of goes really wrong, and they think that she's killed a monster but it actually wasn't her, and she doesn't know what killed this monster, and so she's got to kind of try and play along with the fact that she killed it so that she can stay in the monster hunter group, but also at the same time figure out what actually did kill it and is potentially dangerous to the community that she lives in. I think that's all I'll say. I enjoyed it. It was fun and easy to read, but I didn't love it. It is YA, so you know I'm having a bit of a difficult time with YA at the moment. I think it was a little bit too fast-paced for me, which is going to be a common complaint that you'll hear me reference. I appear to be in my slow book era, so that's where we're at with that. So I enjoyed it, was very angsty, was very YA. It's good. I think if you like the sound of the plot and you want that kind of action adventure type of story, this one is a perfect one for that. I think it's just not what I am drawn to currently. The next book that I read was a series continuation. So this was the second book in the Starlight's Shadow series by Jessie Mihalik. So I read Hunt Stars in January. I read the second book, which is Eclipse the Moon, in February. The third and I think final, I'm not 100% sure on that, but the third book isn't out until June. So I'm all caught up on this series, but I won't be able to finish the series until June, presuming that that's the last one, which I don't actually know that it is, but I think it is. Don't know. Anyway, Eclipse the Moon. This series is kind of like the story does continue, but we follow different characters in this one than we did in the first one, and essentially they're romance books and they follow the relationship between 2 characters. So those are 2 characters, like the primary focus of the story. I don't want to tell you anything more about this one in particular because spoilers for the first book, but essentially we are part of a crew on a spaceship that get hired to do various different tasks. It's very Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers, if you've read that, and if you know, I love that series and I'm really enjoying this series for very, very similar reasons. My word for this book was team, because I thought that this particular pairing made such a brilliant team, and it was almost that more even than the romance that really got me behind this particular coupling and this particular story. I really enjoyed following the characters and following their adventure and their trials and tribulations, and I thoroughly enjoy this series. I really recommend it massively. Then, on a whim, I picked up Adventures in Fosterland by Hannah Shaw, which is the kitten lady who I follow on Instagram and have done for some time. This one is Baby Badger's instalment within this series. I think this is the third book in the series that she's done. This is a children's chapter book, right? You can tell from the cover. It's very short. It probably took me like, what, half an hour to read this, but I just wanted something cute, and this delivered on that. And I knew about Baby Badger's story already because I followed her on Instagram when she was fostering him, and essentially he was a solo kitten and then another kitten clouder is what groups of kittens are called, apparently, according to Sheldon Cooper. I'm rewatching Big Bang Theory. So anyway, this mama cat and her other kittens come in, so after the isolation period is over, Badger joins this other group and finds a new family. It's very cute. Oh, and my word for it was sweet. The next book that I read was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi, and this one is very gothic. It's very weird. My word for it is dysfunctional, because everything about it is dysfunctional. Like the relationship that it follows, the content that it follows is just a strange book, and I really enjoyed it. It is quite slow, so it worked for me in that sense. It's a little bit mysterious. I think I figured out the twist, but only just before it became apparent, so, you know, virtually not. She had me fooled for the majority of the book. It follows, what are their names? I'm so bad with character names. I can remember my students' names, can't remember character names. So we follow Indigo and her new husband. And he's kind of, when he first meets Indigo, he becomes very quickly obsessed with her, and they get married, and she agrees to marry him on the promise that he won't ever look into her past or dig into her past. And then her aunt is dying, so they go back to her childhood home, and things about her past start to emerge, and he can't help himself. He starts to look into it because there's mystery around it all, and he just can't help himself. And it's all a little bit, yeah, it's gothic, it's creepy, it's not scary at all, but it's very, you feel like you're on the verge of finding out something for the majority of the book, and you do find out. It's not one of those where the book ends and you still don't know what's been going on. You do know what's been going on at the end of this, which means that I liked it, because if it had been really open-ended, then I wouldn't have enjoyed it so much. But I did really like this, and a few years ago it would not have at all been the kind of book that I would have liked, but actually it really worked for me. Next were the books that I read for my demisexual reading vlog, so I'm just going to mention them and then we're going to move on, because I don't need to talk about these again. I spoke about them in that video. If you haven't seen that video, please go and give it a watch. It's a super important to me one, so I'd really appreciate it. And let's just list the books and I'll tell you the words that I wrote down for them. So I reread Radio Silence by Alice Oseman, and my word for this was depression. The character suffers with depression. I was really struggling with depression at the time, so depression. Then Letters to Half Moon Street by Sarah Wallace. My word for this, in capitals and with exclamation marks, is obsessed. This is a new favourite of mine. I adore this book. It is fantastic. I interviewed the author, Sarah Wallace, on my channel, so I will link that for you as well. Please go give that a watch too if you haven't already, or rewatch it if you have already watched it. It was super fun to do, and I loved this book, and I'm really looking forward to rereading it very soon. Then I read The Princess Who Didn't Eat Cake by Lynn E. O'Connor, and my word for this one was heavy-handed, because I thought the metaphor was just a little bit overdone in this book. Then I read, it was a non-fiction book, so it has a long title which I have to read because I can't ever remember it. So Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society and the Meaning of Sex. And my word for this is actually 2 words, and it's so interesting, because interesting on its own wasn't enough. I really enjoyed this non-fiction book and it was so interesting. I listened to the audio, which was narrated by Natalie Nordis, which I didn't know before I started listening to it, and that was a lovely surprise as well. Then I read One Good Turn by Sarah Wallace, which is the sequel to Letters to Half Moon Street, and my word for this was easy. And by that I mean it was just easy, comfortable read. Finally, the last book that I read for that particular vlog was The Dragon of Innis by Minerva Ceridwen, and my word for this one was searching, because the characters are searching for something during the book. I won't tell you what because it's very short, and also they are, the protagonist is kind of searching for himself. So that's that one. Then I binge read the Winnowing Flame trilogy. So I reread The Ninth Reign, which I had read about a year ago, and then I went straight on to The Bitter Twins and The Poison Song. So glad that I finally finished this series, and so glad that I binge read them, because I think that that really did give me the best, most immersive experience, which is why I've been wanting to get back into binge reading so much, because I really do enjoy reading series back to back in this way. So my words for these were, for The Ninth Reign, it's different because the magic system is so different, and I can kind of tell you what this one is about, but I can't tell you what the others are about, of course, because they're sequels. So in this one we follow the Eborans. Well, we follow various different people. It's a multi-perspective story. The basic premise of this world is that the Eborans were these immortal beings who survived off of the sap of a tree called Ixaril, but at the end of a war with an alien race called the Duralia, the tree Ixaril dies and so is no longer producing sap, and it is the sap that gave the Eborans their immortality. And because they don't want to die, they are trying everything they can to not die, and discover that drinking human blood a la vampire can prolong their lives, but later down the line they realise that there's a cost to that, and it causes a kind of plague called the Crimson Flux, which ends up killing them even faster. So that's one race of people. Then we have the humans, and we follow one particular human named Vin, who is Lady Vincenza Vintage de Grassol. Not the same Vin as from Mistborn, but you know, she is kind of an historian who's looking into the wars with the Duralia and what happened with all of that. We follow a witch named Noon, and we're introduced to various other characters as we move through the story, but I'm not going to tell you about those. But the magic system, as you can kind of hear from the description, is very, very different to anything else I've ever read, and I really enjoyed this one. But my favourite was actually The Bitter Twins, which is book 2 in the trilogy, and my word for this was creepy. I think there are just lots of creepy things that went on in this story. There's lots of particular scenes which are creepy. There are lots of things that happen to the characters that are creepy. There's just a lot of, and I can't be more specific with you because it's a sequel, but there's some psychological creepy stuff, there's some bug type creepy, in fact this whole series has a lot of bug type creepy stuff, so if you're super squeamish to bug stuff, maybe not the series for you, but it didn't bother me too much. I think there are spiders at some point, which I didn't love, but on the whole it's fine. Mostly it's the psychological creepy stuff that was really creepy about this one, but actually it was a really slow book, and I think that that's why I liked it so much. So I really, really enjoyed that element of it, and I liked the character growth that we got in this particular story and the way that the plot moved forward. And that's one thing about this series, is I never really knew where we were going at any point. Not that it was aimless in any way, but just like I couldn't figure out at any point what was going to happen next, which really has you on the edge of your seat. And then the final book was The Poison Song, and the word I have for this is tense. It is just really, really tense. It's not as long as The Bitter Twins, and it is a little bit more fast-paced, I would say, but again, you just don't know what's going to happen to these characters at any point. So you feel tense, the characters feel tense, everything is all just a lot. I still liked The Bitter Twins more, but I thought this was a really great ending to the series. I'm really glad that, as I said, I did end up binge reading these, because I think I got a lot more out of it reading them that way than I would have by dragging them out as I would previously have done, which is why I reread The Ninth Reign before continuing and finishing these. The next 3 books are books that I do not have a copy of. The first is On Rotation by Shirlene Obuobi, and this one is a romance. I felt like after all of that heavy, creepy, intense fantasy, I wanted something a little bit lighter, so I've been wanting to read this one for a while, and it follows, I can't remember this character's name either, but it follows a protagonist who is a junior doctor and the difficulties that she's having with relationships because of who she is as a person, but also because of her junior doctorship. And it was really fun. I can't remember loads about it. It was just like a little bit of a popcorn read. I had a good time, but you know, nothing more than that. My word for it was repetitive, because it did fall into that trope that a lot of romance books fall into, which is like, we've got a problem, now we solve it, now we've got another problem, now we solve it, and so on and so forth. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. Next was the next book in the Letters to Half Moon Street series, which is actually called the Meddle and Mend series. I didn't say that earlier, which was The Education of Pip. That one just came out towards the end of February and is a more direct follow on from One Good Turn than One Good Turn was from Letters to Half Moon Street. But it follows the same characters, we're in the same world, etc. And I really enjoyed it. My word for it was family, because it really focuses on that found family trope, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I thought that the relationship building and development in this book was fabulous. I'm so excited for the next book. I love this series, and there's going to be quite a few books in this series. Again, go watch that interview if you want to learn more. And then the next book that I read after that was Agatha Christie's By the Pricking of My Thumbs, which I read in a vlog for my mum's birthday, so I'm not going to talk about that here. I'm going to link the video up there for you. One slight spoiler, I suppose, for that vlog is that my word for this book is unsolvable, so it kind of tells you what's going to happen in that video, but there it is. So the next book that I read after that was This Woven Kingdom by Tara Murphy. This is her, well, it's not her newest book anymore because the sequel to this has come out, but this is her newest series. So I've read The Ember and the Ashes quartet, and now I've read this one. It was narrated by Kate Redding, which is a very strange thing because Kate Redding is so Stormlight Archive to me that hearing her narrate something else was just very odd. But anyway, that's where we're at. I enjoyed it. I had the word exciting written down for this one, and it really is that. It's a high pace, exciting adventure story, a little bit like The Luminaries, except this one is lighter. Luminaries is a little bit on the darker side because you're dealing with monsters and things, whereas this one is a little lighter, a little more fun, I suppose. And it is kind of West Asian / Arabian inspired fantasy, so think Jinn, think City of Brass, think those kind of books, right? And we follow 2 characters here, so we have Kamran and we have Eliza, and Kamran is the crown prince and Eliza is, can I say that? Yeah, it says on the back, a long forgotten queen destined to save her people, so I think I can say that. And that's all I want to say. That's all I want to say. It was Not super memorable, but it was super fun while I was reading it. And then the last book that I read in the month finished off another series for me, and it was Actually Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert, the word for which I have is comforting, because it was just a really comforting romance story. It follows Eve Brown, as the name might suggest, who has bounced around from different jobs a lot of her life, and she doesn't really know what her purpose is, and she kind of stumbles upon it accidentally. And our hero of the story is a lovely bed and breakfast owner. It's super cute, and he's also autistic, which was a really nice representation to see. I'm not autistic myself, so I don't know how good the representation was, but I haven't heard negative things about the book, so I'm presuming the representation is fine, and I really enjoyed reading this particular book. And that is it. Those are the books that I read in February. Sorry that this is so late in the month of March. As I mentioned, the month just completely got away from me. I have just before this filmed another video, and I am in the process of filming a vlog, so you will see some videos from me coming very, very soon, and hopefully it won't be too long before I let you have my March wrap up, and it will be a lot shorter than this one because I haven't read quite as much. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks. Bye.